This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's May 1st, 2025. On this day in 2003, President George W. Bush delivered one of his most famous speeches. And in some ways, its fame was really ahead of its time. It was basically a meme before memes were really a thing. And it suggested a grand announcement that was quite literally just way too early. So early that the president's communications director later called the whole thing, quote, one of the biggest regrets of my life. Picture it. A crowd of sailors and pilots standing in formation on the deck of an aircraft carrier. President Bush on a small platform, the podium bearing the presidential seal lined up just perfectly so that the ship's flight control tower rises up behind him. And on top of the tower, a huge banner with the background of a billowing American flag and the words in a bold, all-caps font, white with black drop shadows for emphasis. Mission accomplished. President Bush declared major military operations in Iraq were over just 2 months after the initial invasion, dubbed the Shock and Awe campaign. The banner seemed to suggest even more, that all the fighting was done, or that Americans had found and neutralized the elusive weapons of mass destruction, or perhaps even that the nation had fully avenged the September 11th attacks. Evidently, the banner wasn't part of the announcement at all. It was something that the ship's captain had made to cheer on his crew because they'd finished an incredibly long deployment and were headed home. Bush's team was aware of the banner, but they hadn't really thought through the implications of it showing up in pictures or double-checked the angles to realize it would be in pretty much all of the coverage of the speech. But my memory is that the banner was possibly the most noticed element of that event. Everyone was talking about it. There were so many jokes about it. And even though Bush had never said the words mission accomplished in that speech, I would bet 99% of people who paid any attention to it probably thought he did. As it turned out, the only thing that was over and done was the initial invasion. The Iraq War would in fact drag out for 7.5 more years. No weapons of mass destruction were ever found. And fighting in Afghanistan lasted an additional decade, until 2021. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. A little while back, I used this space to ask and encourage you, as someone who listens to this public radio product, to speak up on behalf of public broadcasting. I explained that a vitally important piece of our industry, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, is in the crosshairs. And it's been amazing to see how many people in our audience contacted lawmakers and explained how important this kind of service is. After a concerted nationwide push to contact lawmakers, Congress passed a continuing budget resolution in mid-March that extends funding for the CPB through 2027. That got support from both sides of the aisle because those lawmakers heard from folks like you. And then, during our spring fund drive, listeners really came through with generosity and donations. Those were victories. But folks, let's be really clear. Nobody is unfurling a mission accomplished banner yet. It's still far too early for that. Those congressional hearings where Marjorie Taylor Greene questioned the heads of NPR and PBS and called for an end to all federal funding for public broadcasting came after the budget passed. The Trump administration has made it clear it plans to ask Congress to claw back a huge chunk of the funding. And this week, the president attempted to fire 3 of the 5 people who serve on the CPB's board of directors, kind of like what he did not so long ago to the Tennessee Valley Authority's board. Except the CPB fired back. The organization filed a lawsuit in federal court on Tuesday, pointing out that the law that created the Corporation for Public Broadcasting only gives the president power to appoint members, not the power to fire them. Other laws explicitly say the heads of fully public federal agencies have their jobs, quote, at the pleasure of the president. That language is absent from the measure dealing with the CPB. And the CPB is not a government agency. It's an admittedly tricky thing to grasp since the organization was created by the government and does receive funding in the budget. But the CPB was created with lots of safeguards in place. to make sure that the First Amendment freedom of the press is not violated, that there's no implied coercion tying that federal money to the support of any particular messaging or programming. The CPB is a private company that receives federal funding because it serves the public welfare. Government officials are specifically barred from serving on the CPB board, and vice versa. Being a board member doesn't make you any flavor of federal official. As all of this goes on, the public broadcasting world as a whole is working to educate the people who do hold positions in the federal government so they can understand how it works and what's at stake. And your continued vocal support absolutely makes a difference. Honestly, you can make a bigger difference right now than any of us who get our paychecks from a public broadcaster. Your opinions about our value have way more sway than anything my colleagues and I have to say. And so I will share again the website protectpublicmedia.org. There's information there about what's happening right now and ways that you can help. Again, that's protectpublicmedia.org. 3 years ago, the state enacted its felony camping ban. Now, Tennessee is doubling down on homeless penalties. That's coming up after the newscast.
Nashville Public Radio is always here to keep you informed, whether it's the latest news or music you should check out. Every week, What Where Wednesdays shares the latest happenings taking place right here in Nashville by talking to members of our community, putting on events in your neighborhood and beyond. So tune in to What Were Wednesdays every Wednesday, and you can always find events at WNXP.org/events.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Concerns about federal surveillance are swaying Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell. He previously stated a desire to reintroduce a contract with Fusus, the controversial police surveillance tool that allows MNPD to access footage from private business owners who've opted into the program. The contract requires approval from the Metro Council, which rejected such a proposal last year. But now O'Connell is beginning to change his tune, expressing some hesitance over bringing the contract back. He cited concerns about recent detainments by federal law enforcement.
I think what we are still continuing to look at is conversations with council members who are rightly concerned about what appear to be erosions of rule of law at the federal level.
Other moves by the Trump administration are affecting O'Connell's decision-making. Extensive federal cuts have led Metro to join 2 lawsuits against the White House and are expected to have an impact on the city's budget. Details of the budget proposal will be revealed today during the mayor's annual State of Metro address, which you can hear on WPLN at 10 o'clock this morning. The mayor of Brentwood faces an ethics complaint as he runs for re-election. The Williamson Scene reports a homeowners association is accusing Mayor Mark Gorman of using his position as an elected official to get private business deals. In 2022, when Gorman was a city commissioner, the association hired a property management company he runs with his wife. They say Gorman used his position as a selling point, offering to help the association resolve a zoning issue in exchange for the contract. The group has since dropped Gorman's business. Gorman has called the complaint a smear campaign timed around the May election. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation says it's investigating the events that led up to an officer-involved shooting in Wilson County on Tuesday. According to a TBI press release, a man barricaded himself in the house where Wilson County Sheriff's deputies were responding to a domestic call. The agency says following a, quote, prolonged negotiation, the man came out of the house firing a handgun at deputies who fired back and killed the man. So far this year, the TBI has been called in to investigate at least 17 shootings by law enforcement officers across the state. One of the Memphis police officers who participated in the fatal beating of Tyree Nichols spent most of Tuesday testifying in state court against his former colleagues. Desmond Mills has taken a plea deal in the case, as he did in a separate federal trial. The Commercial Appeal reports Mills explained how his specialized unit used traffic stops to find potential offenders of drug and money-related crimes. He described using pepper spray on Nichols, who originally ran away from the traffic stop. Mills said he became angry when he got the spray on his own body and switched to beating Nichols with a baton. Mills said it went too far, that he or one of the other officers should have stopped it. He also testified about cover-up efforts, including turning off body cameras and lying on paperwork. A cross-examination focused on the fact that Mills changed his account after his plea deal. Defense attorneys suggested he may have done so under pressure from the prosecution or federal officials. Attorneys for both sides showed video footage of the beating from various angles, sometimes slowed down for greater detail. The newspaper reports several people left the courtroom during the video, including Nichols' mother. Mills is one of 2 officers who took a plea deal in the case. 3 others are facing charges that include second-degree murder. A University of Tennessee Knoxville student is asking her school to sign a national letter denouncing political interference in higher education. WPLN's Camelia Burris reports.
Jenna Ciesla is disappointed her school hasn't called out government overreach on campus.
I'm not really proud my university is standing back and doing nothing. I think it's time for us to try and push to get our university to do something.
So, the political science major started an online petition. She's asking UT Knoxville leadership to protect students' academic freedom and sign a letter from the American Association of Colleges and Universities. It states that students deserve to learn without, quote, fear of retribution, censorship, and deportation. Presidents from hundreds of small to prominent universities like Brown, Carnegie Mellon, and the University of Pennsylvania have signed the letter. Vanderbilt has not. Ciesla also worries about the future of her minor, gender and sexuality studies.
It's also scary that a lot of the stuff I'm learning about is things that may, in 3 months, people will not be allowed to learn about potentially.
Ciesla's petition has garnered 43 signatures. She's graduating early and headed to law school this fall. Camelia Burris, WPLN News.
2 online sports betting firms have ceased operations in Tennessee. One, a foreign company called XBet, got slapped with a $50,000 fine from the state for operating without a license. The other platform, called Legends with a Z, voluntarily agreed to stop offering bets to Tennesseans after it was accused of violating state policies. Legal sports betting is online only in Tennessee, but not all platforms are licensed here. The state's Sports Wagering Council offers a full list of licensed operators on its website. The council also warns bettors to avoid companies that allow betting on credit or that take purely chance-based wagers on things like what color of Gatorade will be dumped on a coach. Humanities Tennessee has announced $250,000 in private funding from the Mellon Foundation. Nashville Banner reports that while the Tennessee nonprofit calls the money a lifeline, it still represents just a fraction of the $1.2 million that the Arts and Culture Council recently lost. Humanities Tennessee, which oversees the Southern Festival of Books and the archaeological study at Fort Negley, is the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Earlier this month, the Trump administration announced it was cutting the bulk of the agency's grants to the state. On its website, the NEH has published an update on how funding is being reprioritized in accordance with Trump's executive orders. Gun owners can bring unwanted firearms to Glencliff United Methodist Church this Saturday from 1 to 4 for a safe surrender event. Unloaded guns should be placed in the trunk. Then volunteers will remove and dismantle them in accordance with federal policies. The owner then donates those parts to be forged into gardening tools through the program Guns to Gardens. The Safe Surrender event is not a gun buyback event, but the church will give thank you cards for donations. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. In 2022, Tennessee became the first state to make camping on public land a felony crime. This effectively puts roughly 8,000 unhoused Tennesseans at risk. Since then, lawmakers have continued to pass bills impacting people without housing. WPLN's Cynthia Abrams reports on the newest measures that passed this year.
When Lisa A. first heard about the felony camping law, she felt it was uncalled for and decided to write a poem.
My state ID says Tennessee. Our public property is for all to see, but don't touch. The park is for everyone but me.
At the time the bill was passed in 2022, Lisa was struggling to find stable housing. She was living in a camper van in a friend's yard, following a spell in a tent. Like many people, Lisa became unhoused during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was this time, when visible homelessness increased nationwide amidst lost jobs and economic instability, that legislation began to crop up.
Advocates have seen huge waves of bills that punish people who are experiencing homelessness for their homelessness.
This is Lindsay Krinks, the co-founder of the housing advocacy group Open Table Nashville. She spent much of the session on the Hill, lobbying legislators. One new law expedites the clearing of encampments under highways or bridges. Krinks calls it a sister to the felony camping bill of 2022.
Both bills are operating with the understanding that homelessness is something that you can clear out of sight, out of mind. It's like a Band-Aid. It's dressing something up on the outside without addressing the underlying causes of homelessness.
The bill pushes for camps to be cleared more quickly by TDOT. That's at odds with what has been happening in Nashville over the past 3 years. Metro is committed to a strategy of closing encampments once providers have put all residents on a pathway to housing. That's involved dedicating pandemic relief funds to things like support services, encampment cleanups, and more transitional housing options, even using motel rooms. While there are detractors, one thing is clear. Moving people indoors takes time. Krinks says homelessness isn't a criminal issue. It's a social services one.
We know that housing and support services is the most effective way to end homelessness.
Senator Brent Taylor, a Republican from Memphis, filed many of the bills this session that address homelessness. He made it a priority after receiving constituent complaints. But Taylor says he was not looking to criminalize homelessness in the same way the 2022 law did.
I was looking for a way to try to get TDOT and the local service providers to work together.
Taylor disagrees with advocates who say maintaining spaces for people to exist is the right approach.
There is no dignity living under a bridge, and whatever life circumstances and life choices have led people to have to live under a bridge is not getting better by continuing to live under a bridge.
But advocates like Krinks fear that people are left with nowhere to go.
The shelters are full. The housing waiting lists are long or closed. We need places for people to be able to exist.
Another new measure this session makes it easier to evict people sleeping in vacant commercial properties. That follows similar anti-squatting legislation on residential properties that passed last year. The organizations finding people housing have also become subject to new rules this year. That's under another of Taylor's bills, which opens charities up to lawsuits if people they have helped house are undocumented and go on to commit a crime. Judith Tackett, who works on homelessness across nonprofit and government sectors, says it's a new approach that feels overly punitive.
Now we're not just going after the people that already have nothing. Now we're also going after the people who try to actually solve what we say we want to solve, which is homelessness.
Tackett has found that removing campsites in 30 days wouldn't account for the months it often takes to get people housed. Plus, the disruption can result in lost property and documents, things people need to access resources. And felony convictions can create long-term barriers to finding a job and housing.
So why would we create these barriers and make it harder for people to work rather than support them in their job searches?
People are not as resilient as we think.
And for Lisa, who is now living in a subsidized apartment, her goal is for legislators to have a better understanding of what it's actually like to be unhoused.
We must have water, sleep, and food, and it must be safe. So if you don't have that, you're going to go downhill fast, and I challenge you to try it. I challenge you to try it out.
Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
Thanks for listening to the Nashvillager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one. And we'll catch back up tomorrow.